Now, freedom of speech and assembly are rights under the United States Constitution. But do these rights apply if your views are extreme? Well, not if you ask Jared Taylor of American Renaissance magazine. He says his group's white nationalist conference was actually shut down because of pressures from protesters, and he joins me now to tell us about it. Now, you said yourself in your press release that your group has controversial views on race. But why do you think that this is why your conference got shut down?
Because we're, in effect, racial dissidents. We don't think that racial diversity is a strength. We think that it's clearly a source of tension and conflict. We also think that it's pretty obvious that people of all racial groups prefer the company of people like themselves. They don't naturally mix together. However, whites are the only group that are so browbeaten and intimidated that they don't dare say so. And this sort of thing is actual heresy in the United States today.
Well, your group tried to say so, and what happened? How was it shut down?
We've been holding conferences ever since 1994, every 2 years, with no problem. This time, we contracted with no fewer than 4 different hotels. Every one of them came under such terrible pressure that they canceled their contracts with us. People would call in death threats. They would go onto the property and push inflammatory flyers under the doors of guest rooms. In the case of one hotel, that only lasted 24 hours before they pulled out. People put pressure on their suppliers and said, if you host this conference, we won't do business with you anymore. This is absolutely outrageous. Our conference had to be pulled.
Why do you think this year? I mean, you mentioned that other years you've been able to hold it. Do you think this is part of some kind of larger campaign, and who do you think is behind it?
I think probably it's a recognition that our ideas have so much appeal. Everybody realizes that what we say is basically true.
Well, if it had so much appeal, excuse me for interrupting, why would so many people be against it?
There are not that many people. It takes only a dozen or so people to bombard a hotel with telephone calls, to leaflet. It doesn't take that many people.
So who do you think is behind it?
Oh, there are people who style themselves as anti-racist. There's something called One People's Project, which I'm sure you've never heard of. Something called the Self-Described Anarchist Collective. I'm sure you've never heard of them either. But they will put up on their web pages, they'll say, look, these vicious, nasty people are going to hold a meeting, bombard the hotel, and shut them down. That was precisely their objective, and they succeeded.
But who's a part of these groups? Who are these groups that
I don't even know.
Down?
I've never met them. I've never met them. But it seems to me just as outrageous is the fact that the U.S. media doesn't care about this at all. It shows how unprincipled they are. They would care, of course, if a group of blacks or Hispanics were unable to hold a conference. But if it's whites who have a different point of view about race, who cares? No free speech, no freedom of assembly for these dissidents.
Okay, so you obviously were upset that the mainstream media didn't cover your conference, and I know you sent out press releases and they didn't cover the fact that it wasn't held. But how are you so sure this is against you guys and your views, and maybe the media just didn't think this was newsworthy?
Oh, well, as I say, depending on who the group was, if it was a liberal group, or again, obviously, if the NAACP or the National Council of Warsaw was chased out of 4 different hotels, do you think the media would be silent? No. There would be a coast-to-coast uproar. There'd be a congressional investigation. The death threats would be investigated by the FBI. I'm sure of this. In fact, it's interesting, when just after he was confirmed, Attorney General Eric Holder complained that Americans are a bunch of cowards because they don't speak honestly about race. We want to speak honestly about race. We represent a lot of things that white people think but never say. Obviously, there are at least a few people in this country who don't want honest conversation about race.
Well, and obviously it sounds like there are people that are threatened by your views. Why shouldn't they be?
Why shouldn't they be? Because we threaten nobody. We believe in complete freedom of association. And if you wish to hang out with your people, by all means. We threaten absolutely no one. In fact, that's all part of the campaign against us, is twisting what we think and what we say into things that it is not.
Well, thank you so much for coming on our show and giving us your side of the story on that, your conference being shut down and you feel not covered by the mainstream media.
It's been my pleasure. Thank you.